The other panel has come on, and these panelists are no strangers to the Immersive Learning Research Network. I'd like to welcome Paula MacDowell, Corinne Brenner, Steve Bambury, and Frazier. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to turn things over to Paula, who will be moderating this panel, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. So, Paula, take it away.
A very special hello and welcome to our friends and colleagues and to folks from around the world who are joining us today for our panel on a topic that is one of my favorite topics, empowering teachers with XR tools. We are honored to be part of the 2022 WebXR Education Summit. Our panel today includes Steve Bambury, Corinne Brenner, Frazier, and myself, Paula MacDowell. Before we begin our discussions, I'm going to invite each of our panelists to give a short 1-minute introduction about themselves so that you can get to know us a little bit better. And let's begin with a short introduction from Corinne Brenner.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Corinne Brenner. I'm the Director of Learning for Killer Snails, which is a small ed tech company based in New York. And we make science content for middle and elementary school students in the US, where we try and put students in the role of a scientist.
Thank you. Next, let's have an introduction from Steve Bambury.
Good evening from Dubai. Steve Bambury, been working in education and training for over 20 years, been playing around with XR for learning since 2011. I currently work as a consultant based here in Dubai. I'm a judge for the World VR Awards. I've been hosting events inside VR since 2017, and yeah, happy to be here.
Wonderful. Next, let's have an introduction from Frazier.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am a teacher by trade. I worked in education for over 20 years, mostly as a middle school history teacher, and now I am the founder and CEO of XR, where we provide safe pathways to the metaverse for kids and empower teachers so they can have the assistance and support to roll out the metaverse in their classrooms.
Thanks to the panel for those wonderful introductions and for contributing your time and your expertise today. Very briefly, myself, Paula MacDowell, I'm an assistant professor in educational technology and design, and I'm joining you today from my office in sunny Saskatoon at the University of Saskatchewan. We have prepared one main discussion question that we want to explore in depth today. And then also we have a series of rapid fire questions that we will save for the end of our panel session today, so you can look forward to many key takeaways. Our main discussion question is, what are effective XR tools for teachers to enhance learning in their classrooms? And I'll invite Kai to get our discussion started.
Okay, well, I'm so biased. So I would say the most effective XR tool, being biased, is XR. So my platform, what we do is we prepare kids to get into the metaverse, and we take into account the challenges that we see when you're getting schools and teachers ready. And one of the big things that's overlooked as far as a tool in preparing teachers is we do professional development for the teachers. The teachers really don't have a main touch point to AR, VR, XR, so they are the ones that are supposed to lead this. They need support too. So our tools include things like professional development or the service for teachers. We do safety training so they know how to use the VR headsets. We make the content, so we have kid-friendly content for those teachers. And we also do metaverse maker spaces. When we have kids and they have that first touch point to VR, they always want to talk about how to make it. But if they're coding, if you have a class with 30 kids and maybe some can code, some can't code, some don't know what coding is, that's what we see normally in classrooms. So our drag and drop makerspace is a really easy first touch point for kids to come in there and start to make their own creations. So we do all these things to help a classroom transition into the metaverse.
Oh, wonderful. And I agree about the need for professional development for teachers. I've said before, without proper support and professional development for teachers, XR in the classroom will fail.
Everything.
We really need that. And in addition, I appreciate the safety training, and I am just curious to learn more about the metaverse maker spaces and opportunities for the students to be coders and creators and to use different tools to express their knowledge and their creativity in different ways. Corinne, how's about you join in on the discussion here?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to reiterate some of the things Kai said, you need to give teachers the support that they are looking for and meet them kind of where they are. So thinking about what can XR do in a classroom that teachers can't do otherwise, that was sort of how I approached this question. And also, you know, Killer Snails focuses on the fact that you can use XR to put kids in control of their experience. They can, in VR, they can have the first person perspective of being a scientist and, you know, making observations in an environment that they couldn't necessarily go to otherwise. So something like being on the ocean floor in Biodive, which is one of Killer Snails' experiences. That was sort of one of the reasons that we looked to VR for that. In AR, you can add layers of information over the real world that they can't get otherwise. There are also other sort of content reasons. So what's the match between what XR can do and what the material is trying to teach? You know, are there cause and effect relationships that you can make more clear using these tools? So things like working on really small scales, like at the level of a cell, there are some really interesting experiences. One's called Looking Inside, that's supported by the Verizon kind of education project. There are things that NASA has made, so they're looking at scales that are really huge. There are looking at time scales, so observing changes over time. All of the EcoMove and EcoXBT projects that have come out of Harvard, those help make that kind of connection really clear. And then I saw in the chat Dr. Messina Morris from Morehouse College, who gave an amazing talk at South by Southwest EDU, where they were using a sort of virtual campus to bring students together and provide a source of community. And I don't want to leave that out, because that's actually a really big part of keeping students engaged in science, is making sure that they feel like they're a part of a conversation and they have social support in addition to, you know, making the content really clear. So I think all of those elements are really important to getting teachers excited about the process of using XR and overcoming some of the technical barriers. And, you know, it is difficult to do something new for the first time. So keeping all of that in mind is definitely part of our process.
I like how you began by focusing on what can XR tools do that students can't do otherwise, and really focusing on like what is a problem of learning, what's a gap that's happening in the classroom, and how can the XR tools help teachers to make the learning more meaningful, more impactful, more inclusive for everybody. And you know, a follow-up question I have for you, Corinne, is around using the XR tools and how they are integrated in a classroom. Like how the XR tools are not the curriculum. They are not standalone. They really do need to be deeply embedded in the lesson, in the unit, in the learning, with pre-activities and post-activities and opportunities for students to connect and reflect on their learning and the XR experiences. So if you have a few comments about that, would love to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. So taking the time to consider, how are you going to use this XR experience? What do you want students to take away from it? And how can you embed like discussion questions throughout? I saw Christine in the conversation ahead of ours. And so thinking about like, where are those opportunities for generative processing? You know, you can have an amazing immersive experience, but if you never think about it again, if you never connect, like, what did I observe in this experience and how does that relate to concepts in science or, you know, something outside of that experience? That's really where the learning can take place, is in that translation, in that extra consideration and questioning and collaborating with others afterwards. So basically that boils down to the advice of leave yourself lots of time. And if you see, there's an XR experience that takes 10 minutes to do, leave yourself 20 minutes to have questions in between and discussion afterwards to really process it with students.
Excellent. Steve, let's hear some of your thoughts on effective XR tools for teachers to enhance learning in their classrooms.
So I've worked at the forefront of education technology and innovation for a number of years. I was there when we first started integrating iPads in the classroom and then moved to the cloud and all of these things. And throughout that journey, I've seen many, many definitions of innovation. And the one that I always go back to is by a guy called Jamie Notter, who's an innovation theorist. And his definition of innovation is change that unlocks new value. And the key word there is new. And I think it's really important that we're looking to implement tools that do unlock new value in terms of learning experiences for the students. Literally just this week, I've been consulting with a company that were looking to develop an educational experience. I'm not going to go into specifics, but when it boiled down to it, I turned around to them and said, what you're trying to do doesn't make sense in the metaverse. It doesn't make sense for you to use XR for this, because you're actually going to create more friction for your learners in terms of getting from point A where they start to point B where you want them to end up. So, it's somewhat ironic because I basically did myself out of a job, but it didn't make sense to include those tools for that purpose. And I think it's always really, really important that we understand, kind of echoing what Corinne was saying, that we are implementing tools in a way that adds value to the learning. I also think that it's super, super important, as my dad would say. Obviously, I'm here in the shiny heights of Dubai, but I'm an East End boy at heart. My dad would say, horses for courses, making sure that you're matching the right types of experiences to the right types of learners. And there are a lot of variables in that equation, age, maturity. I'm lucky that I've been able to work with immersive tech pretty much at every age imaginable. I've worked with 4-year-olds and I've worked with 18-year-olds and beyond, obviously, to into the professional development realm. And the types of technology, the types of tools that you can harness effectively with a 5-year-old are very different and should be very different compared to what you can use with an 18-year-old. And obviously the hardware is another factor there. You're not going to strap a 5-year-old into a Vive or a Quest headset for an extended period of time. So you need to find experiences and tools that are suitable for that demographic. That being said, I mean, for me, I wouldn't have gone so deeply down this rabbit hole over the last 5 to 10 years if I didn't believe in the power of the medium. And everything from the ability for XR to break down the rules of time and space and physics and to empower students with abilities that they can't have in the real world, to the emotive power of the medium and the way that we can foster empathy. And for me, another really big one is the way that we can contextualize learning. The fact that I can use an immersive experience to put students into ancient Rome or into Alice in Wonderland or on the moon when they are studying these topics and really immerse themselves in the topic, the theme, the content that they're covering.
Wonderful. Kai, I think you might have something to add here on Steve's definition of innovation and looking at it as change that's unlocking new value. So for Kai XR, how is it innovation and change that's unlocking new value for teaching and learning in around the world?
Sure. So I would say the big thing that's for teaching innovation that we have is that we make it possible to teach because our tools are accessible. A lot of the conversation that we don't have is that what tools are needed to teach XR. One of the great things about that makerspace that we're talking about is it works on a smartphone. And most of the students in the classroom, they don't have, it's shocking that some people will go into schools where there's no Wi-Fi or there's no laptop. well, how do you teach XR and all this innovation if you don't have the tools? However, a lot of the students do have smartphones. So at the top of making sure our tools are accessible on a mobile-first WebXR type of compatibility, we also make sure that the content they're seeing is inclusive so they can unlock innovation across all the diverse kids that we see. So, you know, we have 100 plus virtual experiences for kids that take them across the world and give them different main characters who are as diverse as the students that we service. So I think a lot of those are overlooked when it comes to getting kids into the metaverse, especially, and without thinking about those things too, it really furthers the digital divide. So we always try to get people to think about the power of WebXR and how that accessibility piece really makes it so all students can be innovators.
That's wonderful, and a perfect lead for Corinne to add a comment here. As Kai is talking about accessibility and inclusion, I know with Killer Snails, there's an opportunity for all students to see it and be it, and to really like be scientists. So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's been a major focus of our research, which our research and development process, iterates continuously as we're making every new project. And so we always try to give students the role that, they are a scientist, they're investigating a particular phenomenon. In the text and instructions that happen, we always call them scientists and whatever name they've given us. And students are really in the first person role of making choices, seeing the consequences of their choices, making observations and drawing conclusions. And that's something that we found to be really effective. And one thing that teachers tell us time and time again is that students who usually aren't that engaged in science class, they take part in the Killer Snails activities. And that's something that surprises teachers. And so that's just a little piece of evidence that we think is really powerful and encourages us that we're doing something right and we're using these tools in a positive way.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it goes back to Steve and leading us with a look at innovation around it, change that's adding new values. So addressing, improving learning, enhancing learning, and offering new value for students. Steve, do you have anything else you want to add before we switch to our rapid fire questions?
I think the only thing I would say is what Kai just said is really, really important, that we often consider hardware limitations in terms of accessibility for students, but really Wi-Fi and internet access is, it is the great commodity. If students, they can have all the laptops and iPads and VR headsets in the world, but if they haven't got robust, reliable internet connections, then these tools are going to be very inaccessible. So yeah, things like WebXR, where there are no downloads or installs required, they're very useful tools for onboarding students, but still, nonetheless, access to reliable internet is always going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. We need access to reliable internet. And just to follow up on the WebXR tools, so from my experience working with grade 8 students, what the WebXR tools offer is a very low barrier, high ceiling. So it's really easy for students to get in, to start creating just right from the get-go. And then there's a high ceiling, so there's a lot of opportunity for students to really take their learning in different directions. And okay, we have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to move into some rapid fire questions. And our first question that I'll ask our panel is, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to give teachers who want to integrate immersive learning into their practice? Anyone can start.
Can we all just go? I would say don't be afraid to fail, because you're gonna. You're bound to. And as with all forms of technology, don't be afraid that the students understand it better than you do, even if they're like 6. because these kids grow up on Roblox and Fortnite and Minecraft, and being inside 3D worlds in particular feels natural to them, and it might not feel natural to a 30, 40, 50-year-old teacher who's trying it for the first time. Don't be afraid to be the learner as well as the teacher.
Yeah, part of that, Steve, I think, is trying the experience yourself first, because even an experience that's designed to be educational, you as the teacher will see opportunities for your specific class and your specific content that nobody could have predicted in the design. So try it yourself first, both for the technical, how is this going to work in the classroom? Is my Wi-Fi strong enough? Does it have a dashboard that I can look at in real time? All of that, and you'll see opportunities that no one could have predicted.
Those are such amazing comments. If I could add anything, I would remind teachers that the VR is one small tool in the lesson. So the emphasis on making sure we're doing like discussion questions, critical thinking, extension to everything, and that makes a full lesson. It's not just you're in the headset and everything becomes magic from there. So everything that Paula just said, plus, it does not take the place of teaching.
Yeah, excellent. Is one small piece, and something we haven't talked about yet today is assessment and the need for new and creative forms of assessment of learning also. So we don't want to recreate, the traditional classroom in XR, and the same thing goes with assessment. We need different ways of assessing beyond just simple recall of facts and information and declarative knowledge. We want assessment that looks at, how do we assess creativity and, relational knowledge and more. Our next question is, describe an education challenge you think XR tools can address in today's classroom. So a challenge, a problem of learning that already exists in the classroom, and how can we use XR tools to help, solve that problem, address it, mitigate the issue for students?
Paula, my answer for this is kind of inspired by what you were just saying about assessment, because in order to get away from the sort of rote memorization style of taking a standardized test, answering multiple choice questions, you can really use tools like Minecraft and like Roblox to let students show what they know. So if they can use a makerspace and be creative and show that they've taken something from the lesson and can apply it in a totally new world where they can do anything, that's a really powerful creative experience for the students, and lets them show their creativity, show that they can apply something that they've learned in a lesson to something that interests them, and is a really interesting way to use tools like Minecraft or Roblox that they probably are already familiar with and might be really excited to bring to the classroom. So the assessment piece, I think, is really interesting. The other element that is a challenge, I think there's a risk of failure that students often have because they know they're being assessed. And so the opportunity for what we call graceful failure, that you can try something in a virtual environment and it doesn't hurt anything. You can try it again. It's like a game where you have unlimited lives and you can always go back and do it again. I think that's something that's really powerful.
I call that virtual rehearsal, mainly because it rhymes. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I've worked with GCSE students, like 15, 16-year-old students, doing virtual frog dissection using the old VirtualiXR app. And this doesn't replace the practical experience for those that want to do it and are capable of doing it without passing out from the smell or the gore of it. But what it does mean as well is that the students can go through and reiterate and practice before the relatively expensive frogs are brought in to do the real thing. And we see this a lot, increasingly in the last 5 years in the medical industry and the way that doctors and surgeons are being trained. It can be a huge benefit in terms of cost saving, but also, as you said, it gives you that safe space where you can make mistakes and I mix this chemical with this chemical, and what does that cause? A nuclear reaction. But all right, rewind, let me try again. And this time I'll try and get the balance right, or this time I won't mix the wrong things that are combustible. So yeah, I definitely heartily agree with that one. I also think that, again, as I mentioned before, that contextualization of learning is really important. I mean, I remember 10, 15, even 20 years ago, teaching historical topics in primary school, you know, like the Vikings, the Romans, World War II, and you would buy these like boxes of artifacts, which were basically like fake statues or fake documents and stuff, and you would give them out to students, and you'd have to try and help them understand what this was and what it is representing. Whereas you can take them into a virtual experience, and they can see those things in the real place. And then again, going one stage further, based on what you were saying, Corinne, about the assessment, you know, it could be that you're giving them those things in a virtual space and saying, right, put these where they should be. Here's a statue of a Greek god. Where would this have been in this town square? You know, would it be stood outside this hall? Would it have been in the middle? What size would it have been? Why would it have been like that? So yeah, I always kind of drill back to contextualizing learning to make sure that it hits home, and it's something that immersive tools have the power to do that no other prior medium has been able to do.
Yeah, and I just jump in because the chat is so great with talking about student engagement right now. Some of the things we see is that even for my most challenging students, if they know that there's a headset that's going to be in the room, they're in their best behavior. The kids are engaged, or even if we tell the kids like tomorrow we're going to use VR, true is not an issue. You know, so it's all these different things. The kids just being super excited and really engaged just to see the technology, and that's something that no matter what book I pull off the shelf, it does not get that reaction from a classroom of students.
What is the hardest subject to teach using XR tools?
So we kind of had this conversation the other week, didn't we? And it was funny because I wrote an article about 5 years ago about virtual reality in English literature and teaching literature. I don't know what you guys call it in the States. It's like English language. No, is it language? No.
Language arts.
Yeah.
Language arts, is it? And somebody else was saying last week that they thought that was hardest as well. It's almost ironic that I think that two of the hardest subjects to teach using immersive tools tend to be the two core ones, you know, English and maths, what we would call in the UK, we call English and maths. Stuff like history, geography, art, design, science, they tend to lend themselves a bit more to those kinesthetic learning experiences. Even language learning, language acquisition. Like I know people that do a lot of great work inside virtual reality, but teaching English literature, there's just not a great range of resources, which is odd because there's so many amazing works of literature in the public domain that could easily be transposed into the virtual worlds. And I know we've seen stuff like Alice in Wonderland recently, but I'd love to see a lot more.
Yeah, I was just singing your praises and saying what a fantastic panel this was, and that the general audience in the chat are saying the same. And I'm really grateful to you all for being here, and Paula for doing such an excellent job of moderating this panel. Really appreciate the work you are doing.